Social impact bonds are effectively a payment by results contract that enables civil society organisations to leverage private social investment for potentially costly service interventions. So they enable a degree of innovation whereby a service provider can provide quite intensive support to a target population, and a number of welfare or social outcomes are produced as a result. As part of the CRESSI Research Project, we're looking at public policies at the EU level, but also at the member state level as well. And one of the things that we've found in our research is that different member states develop distinctive policy agendas when it comes to social innovation. So when you look at something like social impact bonds, they tend to have greater traction in a place like the UK in a liberal welfare regime. So when you look at the capacity for social impact bonds in other parts of Europe, you see that they may struggle to get off the ground. So if you look at places like Germany, in a corporatist welfare regime with very strong welfare federations and a very potentially healthy relationship with the public sector already, social impact bonds don't have as much traction. When you look at social democratic welfare regimes and their interaction and experience of social impact bonds, their system of universal welfare provision kind of limits the logic of social impact bonds. So one of the key motivations for social impact bonds seems to be that there's resource constraint and we need to cut public social spending and produce greater value for money. Now, within the context of budgetary constraints in countries like the UK, that seems to be where social impact bonds have more traction. And as part of the CRESSI project that we're doing at the moment, we're looking at social impact bonds as an instance of social innovation, or a public policy instrument designed to support social innovation. And through our research, we found that SIBs, or social impact bonds, work for different people under different circumstances, and there's not necessarily a key rule book by which civil society organisations can play, but they seem to have a number of benefits for civil society organisations in terms of enabling them to achieve their social mission. So one of the things that social impact bonds are doing is that they're changing the way civil society organisations achieve their social mission. So it's encouraging, through the required payment metrics and outcome-based performance measurement and management, service providers are able to engage in reflexive, critical thought in relation to their service provision. So they can look at what they're doing and assess, is this having an impact? Are my stakeholders being served? And through that, they're effectively building a demonstrable track record, not only of service inputs and outputs, but more importantly, a track record of impact. And through that track record of impact, they then become organisations that are very, or much more likely to be funded, because the move towards outcome-based public sector commissioning and outcome-based investment and social investment is transforming the way that civil society organisations work and need to work in the future. For civil society organisations, it's also helping create new partnerships and networks that wouldn't necessarily be there. What we found in our research is that there's significant administrative data and time burdens placed on service provider organisations. So they have to negotiate with public sector commissioners and investors much more regularly than they would otherwise be required to in a conventional payment by results contract or a public sector contract. There's also the danger that social impact bonds there's such an interest in them and what they're capable of doing that there's more support, administrative, in terms of leadership and finances than would otherwise normally be available in a conventional contract. And what that means is that there's a danger that the problems encountered and limitations, because there are some of social impact bonds, are glossed over. So if there is a problem with a social impact bond model, it's not necessarily being attended to, because the first social impact bonds, there's such an emphasis on proof of concept that they're almost too big or too small to fail. So one of the challenges for civil society organisations and what they do with social impact bonds is how they cope with a changing public sector landscape. That there's significant cuts to public social and welfare services, and very often civil society organisations are firefighting within that context. So whilst social impact bonds offer a great deal to civil society organisations in terms of leveraging alternative revenue streams, they're still faced with the prospect of significant cuts to public services and, as a result, funding streams for the third sector.